I'm staying focused here on unit number 12 as we get started. So quadratics and applications, mainly the solving part. We'll save the applications for the end. But from the beginning on this, okay, be with me. Write stuff down so we've got something to reference later. So today we are going to focus on two types of quadratic equations. Quadratic just means there's an x squared involved by square roots. Now, depending on what they look like, we might do things slightly different. So our first one is going to be where I just have an x squared and there's no x anywhere. There's plain x. We're used to seeing plain x somewhere. We don't see it anywhere. So your first job is going to be to make sure the x squared term's by itself. Okay, and this first one, it's already by itself. I don't have to even do step one. This is great. Step two, square root both sides, not just the side with the square. So we're going to square root both sides. That's true. The squared and the square root cancel each other out and just leave me with x. But here's the thing. So let's say I go to my handy dandy calculator, and to get the square root, we're going to press second and x squared. So let me get this up here. So second, the blue button, and x squared. There's the square root. You can see it. It's in blue. 81 is 9. Now here's the thing though. Your calculator's only going to tell you 9. But there's two answers. What the heck? Why aren't they telling me two answers? Because what we've got to remember is this part. Every single answer you're going to have in here is going to have plus and minus. What? Why? Okay, let me explain why. If I substitute 9 in here, so if I do 9 to the second power, I get 81. If I plug in negative 9, parentheses, people, to the second power, I get 81. That squared that's there means that's how many answers there are going to be to that. So I've got to, now, does that mean every single answer I get is just going to be plus and minus that number? Nope. Sometimes it's going to be two separate answers, and we'll get to see that too. But as long as you're following the steps as you go, you're going to be okay. So, number 2, a little different. I do have to isolate the x squared term first. How are we going to get that plus 5 out of there? Let's subtract that out. Now I'm in a situation similar I was to number 1. Once it's down to just x squared, it's square root time. And if you happen to know the square root of 25 off the top of your head, you can just go there. If not, again, second, x squared, 25, plus and minus 5, because there's 2 answers. So a lot of this is going to be like first semester solving an equation, except for that last step. Now here, this last one's where we got to be careful. If there's plus or minus stuff, you've got to do that first. You cannot, don't divide the first step here. That's going to get ugly. So we'll undo that minus 8. X squared still not alone. Don't square root yet. What's my next step? Divide by 3, because we're multiplying by 3. We're just doing opposites. Both sides. It's true. Now, yes, good thought. You're like, wait a minute. Okay, I know this is the square root part, and those go away, and this is x equals. What do I do? Okay, there's two things you can do here. So if I type in the square root of 10 and I get a decimal, I don't care. You can leave it as a square root. Okay, that's an exact answer. That's fine. Or if you want to go to a couple of decimal places, call this like plus or minus 3.16. I'll admit most of the practice sheets we're going to do when there's answers at the bottom are going to be in decimals, but I'm perfectly fine with either of those. If we can, yeah, if you can break it down, you need to. Yep. Yeah, if you left it as plus or minus the square root of 25, I'd put like minus a half or something like that. I won't zack it completely. But yeah, if it gets decimally, I don't care which way you go. But that's it. That's, if it's just x squared, get x squared alone, square root it. Just add the plus minus thing. That's all we got to do. Now, little different when we play the parenthesis game. We still got to isolate the part that has the x, okay? So here, there's nothing else on the parenthesis side. We just get that set. So step one, we're good. Square root both sides. Okay, so square root. So right, this side is just what's under the radical, the x minus 3, what's under the square root. The other side, we're going to put plus minus. Now again, you're going to have to probably make a decision at this point on how you're going to tackle this. If you're keeping it as the radical, you're going to keep it that way. And I'm actually going to show you both ways on this one. You pick which way you think's better for you. So I'm going to try this out though. So the square root of 30 is a decimal. If you are not a decimal fan, leave it as the square root of 30. That's fine. We'll do it the decimal way too here in a minute. So your last step then, okay, now we're looking and we're like, set up two equations, minus 1 and plus 1 with the answer. Again, here, the easiest way to keep this straight probably. So I set up one with positive 30. I set up one with negative 30 because I got two different answers. So I'm going to kind of look at it like it's two completely separate equations that I'm dealing with. And so at that point, then I just solve. I want to get x by itself. So here's the other thing, and why I'm probably going to suggest for most of you going to a decimal. Because here's what people get confused with. This 3 is not under a radical. I can't add that to 30. So it's just going to be 3 plus the square root of 30. Or you could say the square root of 30 plus 3. But I can't put it in that way. And it's going to be the same idea over here. I'm going to have 3 minus the square root of 30. If I'm keeping it exact answers, that's what my answers are going to look like. But again, people tend to get confused. They're like, why can't I just add 30 to that? Well, that's under a square root, and this isn't. So here's how we can avoid that. I'm going to kind of rewind to this step. This might be the better option for us. So we said the square root of 30 is like 5.47 or 5.48. That's my other option. So this way, when I break it into pieces, and you don't have to do it both ways for all these, for goodness sake. What's that? Well, here's the thing. So unlike that first group, when we just put plus minus and had the number and we were set, with these, now since everything's a decimal, I can just keep it in there that way. And I think that's going to be easier for us Because now I can be like negative 5.48 plus 3. And I'm not having to worry about what can go together, what can't go together. So I would probably say for just about everybody, this is probably going to be the easier way to do it. And that's the way I'm going to do it on the last one we're doing on the examples. Like I said, when you get to Algebra 2, we'll be keeping it more in exact values as you kind of move up the levels. But for now, just to keep life simple, that would probably be your best route. Still going to have two answers, though. Yes, they're going to be different. Unless it's a perfect square on the other side, sometimes it'll be the same. But most of the time, it's going to be different. So last one here, at least on the note part here. Again, we got to get this alone first. How am I going to get the 5 out of there? We got to divide because we're multiplying by 5. So we got to get that out. Divide by 5. Once the parentheses are alone, we're ready for the square root part. So the square root's going to wipe out the squared. Yay. The square root of 16 is 4. And now we're ready for our two equations, which is going to be nice this time because everything's nice numbers. So x plus 1 is positive 4. X plus 1 is negative 4. So we catch each sign once. This side stays the same.
So it's the x equals negative 3. Oh, no.
Yeah, we're not always going to be able to look like we do when it's just x squared and have it be plus minus. It will not work out that way. So that's kind of our deal here. Two different looking things basically being done the same way. We're just going to stick with decimals though. So we'll keep this handy. New practice packet here up to quiz 11. So for today, we are going to be dealing with pages 1 and 2 here. This first part again, this is, 1 through 9 is going to be like examples 1 through 3. We're going to get that x squared alone. We're going to square root. If we get a decimal, that's okay. So, again, that's for numbers 1 through 9, would be that left-hand column of the notes. When we get down to 10 through 12, and actually beyond then for the rest, so we'll say 10 to 20, those are all going to be like examples 4 and 5. No review stuff today. Straight up new stuff, getting it down, doing it well, and kind of seeing how things are going.